Because it's interesting, I'll just maybe for a minute even go back about my dad, and I know you know Donna Jean
Yes.
Kocher. Her dad was the guitarist in my dad's band,
Okay.
and they played together from the time they were 17-year-old boys until I think Sam was 80. Donna's dad was 80. And when I say they worked differently than I grew up, and certainly different than now, I mean, they played 6 or 7 nights a week all the time, and some Saturday and Sunday afternoons. So when I say I was practicing in my room and my dad was on his way to work, his pattern was dinner with the family because that was his time to be with us because we were in school and doing things in the day. Dinner was sacred to him because that was the time he got to spend with us. And it was always positive. It never had a negative bent or tone ever. You never talked about report cards at dinner.
Okay.
It was all good stuff. And then he went up, got dressed, put his tuxedo or a suit and tie on. Maybe his Sam would be out beeping the horn. My dad would pile down the steps and out to work it was. And they did that every single night of my young life. So musically at that time, I was taking lessons from a man in the neighborhood in Ardmore. And being the realist that I am and the honest human being that I am, I grew up with talent, but I wasn't a child prodigy. And I remember saying to my dad at that age, and I'll say 13 or 14-ish, I think there's something wrong with the situation and the man who's teaching me. He said, "What do you mean wrong?" I said, "Well, I know I wasn't born a genius. I know I wasn't born a child prodigy, but I play better than he does. So I need you to help me move on, you know, and I need a teacher that can help direct me in a better way and teach me more than I'm getting at this point." And I will say that I remember some reluctance in his part at that time. And it was probably because he, growing up and living a life of a musician, although he had a pretty successful life, very successful life as a musician, I guess he knew what it was, not I guess, he knew what it was about, and it was not an easy life, as you know. And I think he may have fought me a little bit about that. And then finally, he finally took me to meet Buddy Savitt, who was an important person in Philly in those days. And that really is the time that moved me up quite a few pegs in knowing what jazz was about and how to approach it and how to begin to learn it.
Okay. How old were you when you started education with Buddy Savitt? Tell me about how old he was and what it was about his mentorship that meant so much to you.
I was about 15 years old when I met Buddy Savitt, and my father had taken me to the Charlie Ventura School of Music, which was at Broad and Spruce, where Kenny Gamble and Leon Hoff later had their offices, their building. And whomever it was there, it wasn't Buddy, but said that I could study there with Buddy Savitt, and it made my first time on a Saturday morning. And it was so wonderful meeting him like I did because, I lived in the suburbs, but I always dreamed of being in the city and living in the city. So it was a great, great experience for me at 15 to grab my alto saxophone in the case, go to 69th Street where the terminal was for the elevated, which is the subway, or the L. They called it the L, was the elevated subway. And all by myself go into Center City with my saxophone to take my lesson with Buddy Savitt. I think being a sensitive young guy that I was, I don't think it took me more than a lesson to realize that Buddy did not have such an easygoing, simple life, and had some addiction issues, which is no secret, of course, to anyone that, especially any of us that knew Philadelphia and Buddy. And after that first lesson, my stop prior to getting to the place where I took my lesson was to go to the Horn and Hardart Automat and stop by and get Buddy a muffin and a cup of coffee and some orange juice and bring it to my lesson because I just figured he probably needed it.
Right.
And I guess I would say Buddy at that time, I guess was at least 30, or early 30s at that time. But he amazed me with his skill. He obviously wasn't a educated man outside, formally educated beyond high school. I think he went to Mastbaum High School. But he knew so much. Not only could he play so much and had such phenomenal ears, but he knew so much. And he would play a solo for me or play something for me improvisationally, and then I would say, man, that sounds so good, I wish I could do that. He said, well, I'll write out for you what I just played. And he would play it again, similarly, and then he would write it out for me, and he would say, take that home and learn that for next week if you can in 12 keys, which is what we all do as, jazz educators. If you can play it in one key, you need to learn to play it in all the keys, ultimately, anyway. And he and I struck up a really, really, really close teacher-student relationship at that age. And then as I got older, into my, college age years, 18, 19, 17, 18, 19, and 20, and started to get busy playing in Philadelphia as well, we ended up becoming more like colleagues, although I was a younger colleague of his, and he will always remain a mentor and a man who meant so much to me, but we related, I think, to each other in a different way. But I stayed really, really close to him forever until he passed away, which was when he finally made a healthy, significant move with his family to the Atlantic City area, because one of the men who had the orchestras, Paul Mann was his name, I think it was at Caesar's Palace in Atlantic City when gambling came to Atlantic City, and Buddy moved with his family to Brigantine, New Jersey, and really assumed a healthy lifestyle and was doing well and was working and was active, was playing as well as he ever played, but sitting in an orchestra, and playing his doubles and clarinet and a little bit of flute and all that. And tragically, that didn't last too long. Buddy ended up getting brain cancer and passed away, I think at 58, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was the age Buddy passed away. So that was sad. But he remains a very important person in my life, musically speaking, educationally, and as a mentor and friend.
Where you went to study with him, was that 309 South Broad Street, where the Philly International was later?
Well, yeah, the storefront where actually was a storefront even when Gamble and Huff had it. Well, that school was in one of those stores.
Okay. And it was
Charlie Ventura School of Music.
South Philly guy.
Yeah, Charlie Ventura was the saxophone player that.
I mean, it was just his name on the building, you think?
Yeah, he didn't own it. Somehow I don't know how that worked.
Yeah. But it was in that 309 South Broad Street. Right.
Yeah.
And you're saying this was around 1960? I think Cameo Parkway moved into that building in the early 60s.
I was 15, so yeah. So 1960-ish, yeah.
I don't think Cameo Parkway had moved in there yet even, until like 62 or so.
Was Cameo Parkway in that building, or they were in the Schubert building?
Cameo Parkway was actually on Walnut Street, 14-something Walnut Street. They were never in the Schubert.
Because Gamble and Huff started in where the Merriam is now?
The Schubert, right.
The Schubert
And
building.
then they bought the Cameo Parkway building.
Right.
But I think when you were studying there, Cameo Parkway wasn't there yet. That's
Okay.
all I meant. But,
Yeah.
I think they moved in a couple of years later. Anyway.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about your schooling. Where did you go to elementary school and high school or middle school? We used to call it
Junior high when we had it. Right.
And what kind of musical activities did you participate at all in school with music, or?
And then go through the college years or not?
Yeah, we're gonna go through each one of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, what elementary school did you go to?
I went to the Wynwood Road Elementary School in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, which was like a block and a half from my house. And then I went to Ardmore Junior High School. And then right next door to Ardmore Junior High School was Lower Merion Senior High School, or Lower Merion High School. And graduated from high school in 1963. And then went to college at the what is now known as the University of the Arts, which was at that time the Philadelphia Musical Academy, which was, we were housed in 3 brownstone buildings on Spruce Street, right around 16th and Spruce, between 16th and 17th, but right around the corner of 16th and Spruce. And
Did you participate in
oh yeah,
marching band or anything like that?
in elementary school, I played in the band that we had in school, which was just a little, ensemble of elementary school kids. In junior high school, I did play in the marching band, but admittedly hated every minute of it. Just being out in a marching band and having to go through that. In high school, I did not want to play in the marching band, so I played we had a concert band there. But in those days, there was no such thing as a stage band or jazz band, but there was a concert band. So I played in that ensemble, which was nice, good music.
Okay, so when was the moment you decided that you were going to be, that was going to be your chosen profession, was music? Did you have a moment like that since you went to?
I think I do in high school, so yeah. I think that I realized probably early in high school, maybe 10th grade or 11th grade, that I was going to pursue a career in music. But I guess, as we'll touch on later in our conversation or the interview, I guess mainly due to my mother's side of the family and some of my uncles, who I liked very much and respected very much, there was also a little part of me that toyed with and thought about, I wonder if I want to go to medical school later. And that, I had that conflict for years. I mean, I'll tell you some of the stories about going in and out of medical school for musical reasons. But I think I will say, at the core of myself, I'm a musician. But there was, or still is, a part of me that I guess always wanted to heal if I could, in some way. And I always kind of loved the fact that people can study medicine and even later on psychology and things like that, and help other people get through life in a better manner than they could without their help. So, of course, then I kind of amalgamated that, if that's the right choice of a word, looking at music in that light as well, and realizing that we are able to heal and give peace and good health to people, musically speaking, too. I mean, I'm a firm believer in, I've threatened to write a book many times and I can't sit my butt down long enough to do it, but I've often thought about, and I do it even in psychology, just talking about if we would all learn to improvise in life itself, what a better universe we would have. If each individual could learn to improvise rather than live with dogma or things about, well, this is how I grew up, so this is how I see myself, and this is how I should raise my family. When the world changes and shifts, and where aren't we seeing that now in our existence, if we could all learn to improvise a little bit with our thoughts, perceptions, and feelings, we would not only help ourselves but help others in that way, I think. So I think I knew in high school what I really wanted to do and should do. Yeah.
All right, so you decided, instead of going to taking science and liberal arts, you just went right into music right after high school, right? Okay. Tell me about PMA. What it was like.
Philadelphia Musical Academy was very interesting. It was not a jazz school. It was strictly a classical school at that time. They had no jazz department. A few guys earlier than myself, who became pretty well-known Philly guys, had gone to that school, so played jazz maybe in some of the practice rooms. Mike Natale comes to name, the trumpeter, and Vince Trombetta. And they had later done the Mike Douglas show in Philadelphia, but they were maybe 2 years ahead of me, before me. And so I had to go into, I was accepted as a composition major at that school. And I thought about being a clarinet major, but I had only very recently, like maybe months before, gotten a clarinet, so I wasn't prepared enough as a clarinetist to audition. But I was writing music, so I was able to become was accepted as a composition major. And of course, all the theory exams and all that you have to go through.
Have saxophone as
No.
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 Would have been clarinet.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, saxophone was not a major, nor was it even when I applied later for graduate school, which we'll talk about later, to Juilliard. I went as a classical saxophonist. There was no jazz department. They did look at the saxophone classically, but the musical academy did not view the saxophone as a legitimate instrument, because it wasn't an orchestral instrument. That was tough for me, of course. So I played a lot of saxophone while I was in school. And I don't know if, this is interesting too. I don't know how many people even know this, but the guys, friends of mine and colleagues of mine who still are, who were going to Curtis at the time, even as drummers, if they were found, as percussionists at Curtis, if they were found playing a gig on drums, their career at Curtis would be terminated, So it was a pretty weird environment for those of us that wanted to play jazz at the time. But I continued to do it and pursue it. In 1967, which was my first year that I was able to get into the Villanova Jazz Festival. Prior to going to the Jazz Festival, we were rehearsing, and one of the janitors used to allow us to get in at night to one of the rooms because he knew we wanted to play jazz and we would not be able to ever do that in the daytime as a band for rehearsal. As in the process of doing that, I'm not even sure how we pulled this off, but on a Sunday afternoon, we gave a concert in the small performance space. We were still in those buildings I talked about earlier on Spruce Street. And we gave a concert with the quintet that I had in that space. And the president's wife had heard about us being there and came in, and about 30 minutes into our performance threw the fire alarm to get everybody out of the building, including us. So that's how much jazz didn't have an appeal for the school. That being said, however, Evan Salat is a trumpet player and an educator forever. He was a year ahead of me, and he started to teach immediately upon his graduation. So he began, I guess, the inception anyway of the jazz program. He had a big band there, and he also took the big band to the Villanova Jazz Festival. My first year, did not win the festival, which is weird for me to even say that word when you think about something in the arts, but it was a competition. So you won for the best small group, the best big band, best saxophonist, best trumpeter, and all of that, which I'm proud to say I won many times all over our country, those awards as the best saxophonist or best instrumentalist, and my whole band did. So Steve Weiner was the trumpeter, and he would be best trumpeter, and Jimmy Paxson was the drummer, and he won best drummer award, and and a lot of times we were the best instrumental small group. Um, at Villanova, Ohio, Miami, Connecticut, so many of the festivals we played. So we really, we were feeling really great about ourselves. And I mean, and I don't mean in an egotistical way at all, just feeling good that we had really gotten to that level where we could play this music that we love so much. Consequently, and subsequently, the school became a little bit enamored with that, and that Evan was doing such good things too. And the big band won at Villanova as well. I think at 67 they won. I didn't win until 68 as a small group. So the school started to pay attention to that, and then courses began that were a little more oriented toward jazz programs, and the saxophone was looked at as a legitimate instrument finally. And then the school itself, with the different presidents that they had and deans, started to change. So it became not a classical school anymore. It was a jazz and contemporary music school. And now it's, I think, the University of the Arts itself, in its entirety, I think is the biggest art university in our country. You know, with dance, theater, music, and all the technology that goes on and everything else. In fact, they have a PhD now in, I think it's called a PhD in improvisation. It's crazy, you know, which is wonderful, you know.